Hey, Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Thanks so much for being here. I want to say one thing up front here. Word on the street is that there are other news outlets whose ratings are crashing. And there's news divisions and the opinion divisions, and the opinion people make all the money, and the suits at the top are telling them what they can and cannot talk about relating over here. And the opinion people, they want to criticize their own network because they made a lot of mistakes, but they got to be very cryptic about it because they're in the network. Just tell you up front, the big wigs here at the First have never once told me what to say or what not to say in any way whatsoever at all. We are the First Amendment, free speech. And I'll never forget, it was a couple months ago, and I forget exactly what it was about, but I was asking them if I should or can go in a certain direction with something. It may have been the first time I've ever asked that question to anyone in radio or TV land. And I'll never forget, my boss said, yeah, whatever. Do whatever you want. Sure, it's great. Like, it was never hesitation of like, oh, I don't know, should you? It's like, yeah, sure. True freedom of speech is our first priority here at the First. All right, you ready for this? Let's do it. Neil Postman. You ever heard of Neil Postman? I have not until 2 days ago. Been on a big Neil Postman rabbit hole, and I don't even want to get out of it. 1985, he wrote a book called Amusing Ourselves to Death. And I want to quote a good portion of it here. So the context here is Orwell's 1984. So Orwell wrote 1984, 1949. So 1984, it came and went, right? And that dystopian future that Orwell was talking about hasn't happened yet. And here's Neil Postman talking about, well, what happened? And he says, well, there's another dystopian book that people don't talk about as often as they do Orwell's 1984. And it's Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. And these two writers did not prophesy the same thing. In fact, they were quite opposites. So here's what Postman said. Orwell warns that we will be overcome by an externally imposed oppression. But in Huxley's vision, Brave New World, no big brother is required to deprive people of their autonomy, maturity, and history. As he saw it, people will come to love their oppression, to adore the technologies that undo their capacities to think. Big Brother doesn't have to force you to go on Twitter. Big Brother doesn't force you to go on Facebook. Big Brother's not forcing us to do anything, but we're lured into it. And these things that we've been lured into, they destroy our capacity to think. That's where we are as a country. We've always joked that, you know, in George Orwell, 1984, there's the telescreen. Big Brother forces you in your home to have this telescreen that they can watch and listen to everything you're doing. We pay $100 for Alexa. We pay Amazon to spy on us, right? We download voluntarily TikTok, which is a communist China spying app and propaganda app. We voluntarily put it on our kids' phones, or we let our kids download, right? Like, what's wrong with us? Huxley was way closer, right? All right, here we go. What Orwell feared were those who would ban books. What Huxley feared was that there would be no reason to ban a book, for there would be no one who wanted to read one. Orwell feared those who would deprive us of information, but Huxley feared those who would give us so much that we would be reduced to passivity and egoism. And we're just bombarded today by the news cycle. That's more closer to being true. Orwell feared that the truth would be concealed from us. Huxley feared that the truth would be drowned in a sea of irrelevance. Orwell feared we would become a captive culture. I mean, like, we'd be forced to go and all do the same thing, like North Korea. Huxley feared we would become a trivial culture. As Huxley remarked in Brave New World Revisited, the civil libertarians and the rationalists who are ever on alert to oppose tyranny failed to take into account man's almost infinite appetite for distractions. And I'll end here. 1984, people are controlled by inflicting pain. In Brave New World, they're controlled by inflicting pleasure. In short, Orwell feared that what we fear will ruin us. Huxley feared that what we desire will ruin us. We need to be on the lookout not for Big Brother imposing these things like a Soviet dictatorship. Although, yes, we need to be aware of that too. We need to be on the lookout for the Brave New World approach, which is bad actors alluring us into, at the very least, things that undo our capacity to think. Okay, so why do I share this? A ton of reasons, but the genesis of it is, assuming Trump loses his election, and even acknowledging that Republicans won a ton of congressional seats in the Senate and a bunch of state houses, we're still a very divided nation. And conservatives will never really win elections. And I mean really win them, not like 51, 49, like whatever, really win an election until we fundamentally change our culture. Culture comes first. Politics reflects culture. And even if Trump won, he'd just be at best a temporary stopgap to hold back a progressive tidal wave. Maybe he'd give us 4 years to bring about what we really need in America, and that's a spiritual awakening. That's what we really need. And that's not going to be achieved out of the White House or in government at all. Government doesn't come first. Culture comes first. Government doesn't lead. Government follows. So who are we? That's the question. Who do we want to be? And the government will eventually reflect that. There's been for 50 years, there's been a march through the institutions by the Marxists and the progressive culture makers. It's 50 years. They've taken over every single institution in America, every single one of them. Universities, K through 12, the music industry, movies, books, art, media, news, sports. The left has all of it. All of it. Name one thing that the left does not have complete and total control over in our culture. There's not one. This march through the institutions was not about Trump. It predated Trump by 50 years. And it's not going to stop with Trump in the White House or out of the White House. The march continues. And it's a cultural march. We need a cultural, seismic change in America. And the problem is, well, actually, let me first ask you, do you think that's true? Like, do you want that? Do you want a massive, seismic, cultural sea change in America back to traditional conservative values? Do you want that? Because if not, then I guess we're done here, right? All right, as you were, continue on if you think everything's just fine, hunky-dory the way we're going. If you do want that, great. Now here's the bad news. To do that, you need a cultural change in yourself. Too high of a price. And the rich young ruler walks away. Right. Rich young ruler asks Jesus, what can I do to go to heaven? And Jesus tells him, and the rich young ruler, the Bible says, he was deeply dismayed by these words, and he went away grieving. Didn't want to do those things that Jesus told him to do. Deeply dismayed, went away grieving. No one wants to change their life. No one wants to change their habits, their thoughts, their priorities, their kids, their family, their life. But we want to change all of everyone else. We want to change all of culture to be better. But I don't want to change it. Plus, I'm perfect anyway as it is, so you're not talking about me, Slater, obviously, right? It's impossible. You can't change culture until it starts with you, and that's hard, and that requires work. And no one wants to do it. So instead, we keep watching the same old TV shows. We keep listening to the same old music. We keep buying the same old products. We keep living the same old rat race. We keep having the same priorities that other people set for us. We keep sending our kids to the same school because it's free. We keep enriching the same old culture makers. We keep teaching our kids the same bad habits. We keep obsessing over the same old social media accounts. And it's all done in the name of amusement and comfort and ease. Big Brother's not forcing us to do these things. We do them on our own. We don't change a thing about our lives, and we expect the culture to change? Doesn't make any sense. We don't change a thing about our lives, but we expect everyone else to change theirs. And again, you can tell you're already ticked off at me for even saying that because you don't want to hear this, right? It's so much easier to just be like, everyone else needs to change. It's not how it works. I mean, it goes back to the concentric circles of responsibility that we talk a lot about on this show. Your life, you're in the middle. And if your life doesn't change, your family's life will never change, and your church will never change, and your community will never change, and your country will never change. And we are just going to keep culturally and politically moving in the same old direction right off the cliff. What's the other way? What's the other way? Oh, we don't, how about this? Here's the other option. We don't do anything. We don't change anything. We don't change our culture at all. And maybe we'll take back the House by 2 seats. Maybe we'll pick up another Senate seat. Maybe one day there'll be a president who's a conservative-ish, kind of. That's the best we're hoping for? What other outcome do you possibly see? Every founding father talked about a virtuous people being necessary for a free country. Necessary, not a nice thing that we should kind of think about maybe getting around to one of these days. Like the necessary prerequisite for a free country. We want the quick fix, right? So we look to DC. But when we do that, we're no different than the progressives. That's what progressives do, right? Progressives think that all good things come from government and we have to fix any problem in America, we got to do it through government, through an executive order. They're the solution to all of our problems. And conservatives are falling for that, right? We are like, oh, like we're losing our culture. We got to win the presidency. And listen, it's nice to win the presidency. I wanted to win the presidency. But that's not going to change the things that are going on in our culture, even if Trump won. There's an argument to be made that if Trump ends up losing it, that's not even the worst thing, because if he won, a lot of conservatives would be like, oh, we got this. No, we got nothing. You literally have nothing. Conservatives have nothing. Conservatives may not even have the church. May not even have the Christian church anymore, right? That's how bad things are. We'll do a whole nother hours and hours on the progressive critical race theory takeover of the church today. I'll just leave you with this. The largest denomination, the largest Protestant denomination in America is the Southern Baptist Convention. They changed their name because the word Southern is racist, okay? They're now called like the Great Commission or something like that. They changed their name. The largest Protestant denomination in America changed their name because the word Southern has racist connotations. That's what I'm talking about, all right? So if Trump loses, at least maybe now we can wake up. People can finally realize how surrounded by the left every single aspect of our life really is. So this is what I'm calling for. I'm calling for an audit, an absolute audit, and question every input in your life. Question every input, reevaluate every habit, every routine, everything you've ever thought was true. Reevaluate everything you do just because your parents did it that way. Everything you eat, say, think, everything you worry about, everything you focus on, what time you go to bed, what time you wake up, the toys you buy for your kids, the websites you go to every day, who you trust for your news. Everything in your life, in my life, needs an audit. Do I do this thing because it's good? Or do I do it because I've always done it this way? Or because my parents did it this way? Or because culture says I should do it this way? And because I think everybody else is doing it this way? Those are crap reasons. Stop doing them that way. It's a Marie Kondo of our life. Remember Marie Kondo was popular for a while? And her whole cleaning method is you got to take everything out of your closet and throw half of it away at least, and then put everything back in. That's what we have to do in our lives. COVID was good for rethinking our routines, right? Because we had to, everything was upended. But this post-election time is good to reevaluate every other aspect of our lives. We got to do it. Why? Again, here's the track. First, you curate your inputs, and I hope we're one of them. Curate your inputs. Then we can see the truth clearly, right? We get rid of the fog because we're totally lost right now. So we got to get rid of the fog so we can see the truth. That will change culture in our home, and then in our communities, and then in our country. And only then can conservatives really win elections. But by that point, our lives and the world will be so much better. Winning elections will be like a nice side effect. It'll be like a nice afterthought side effect to everything that we're really trying to do in this country. So anyway, that's where I'm at right now. I hope you'll join me. We need a great awakening in this country. And I think the first step is recognizing we have a problem, and then a proper assessment of how manipulated and controlled by progressive culture we really are. Only then can we cut it out of our lives completely, which is what we need to do. Talking about getting rid of things and then putting good things back in your life. Read an article from the head of real estate strategy at Wells Fargo, and he said he doesn't think gold will get to its high by the end of the year like he originally thought, but he's more certain than ever that it will hit $2,300 in 2021, right? So he's less certain it's going to happen faster, like next month, but more certain that it's going to get a higher high. And that's awesome. I think yesterday with the stock market, or 2 days ago when the stock market shot up, everyone was very excited about a new vaccine, but now everyone's realizing how long it's going to take to get the vaccine to everyone across the country. And everyone's realizing that, we have a ton of money that the government's been printing, right? Trillions of dollars of stimulus packages that will lead to inflation. There's no way it won't. There's no way inflation doesn't happen. Right? We may all live in our own fantasy lands politically, but you can't deny the economic rock solid truth that has existed for all of time, and that is you print more money, unprecedented amounts of money, inflation goes up, the value of the dollar goes down, gold goes up, end of story. So how do you get gold? Patriot Gold Group. They're the best, highest rated by Consumer Affairs, A+ Better Business Bureau. That's where I bought my gold and silver. And there's the number, 1-800-798-4260. They'll answer any of your questions. You'll be amazed how easy it is. And you'll be prepared for not only the worst that's to come, but I'd argue the inevitable that's to come. 1-800-798-4260 or patriotgoldgroup.com. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. So I got to tell you, I am very grateful. I hope I didn't sound negative in that last segment. I'm not. I'm encouraged by the future and what's to come. I really am. And I'm very grateful for our broken culture. Let me put it like this. The best thing, obviously, right? The best thing for our culture to be is righteous and pure. Okay, we all want that. But the second best thing that our culture can be is rotten to its core. So obviously rotten and spoiled and corrupt that it's undeniably so. The worst thing our culture can be is rotten enough to kill you, but good enough that most people won't even notice. Or they'll think it's worth it anyway. Think of it as there's a lot of different analogies. Let's do a spoiled piece of meat, right? Let's take meat. So the best thing is obviously a fresh, delicious ribeye steak. The second best thing is a piece of meat that stinks and you take it out of the wrapper and you're like, oh, and like, there's no question it's rotten and you have to throw it away. That is actually better than the third option, which is a rotten piece of meat that, I think it looks okay. It'll be fine, right? Here, you smell. Is that okay? Yeah, I think it's fine. Go ahead, let's eat it. Because you're gonna eat it and you're gonna get sick, right? That makes sense? So for decades, my whole life, I've been eating a rotten piece of meat that I thought looked fine. Like, that smells, it's okay. Probably not, but I think you'll be okay. So I'd eat it and get sick. Public schools are the perfect example, right? Public schools, growing up for me, I went to a good school, but that's only because I grew up in a pretty nice town and kids could read because parents valued education. But the school wasn't exceptional by any means. And they weren't exceptional in what they taught or why they taught it or its reason for really existing. I went to a college that wasn't about education. It was about status and exclusivity, but you play along with the game. And I did. I played the game. Now, public school and the college I went to are so rotten to the core. Public school curriculum is so rotten. Universities are so poisonous to the mind and to the soul. There's no way anyone can partake in that anymore. And there's no way I'm partaking in it anymore. And I'm grateful for that because now we can find true alternatives. I want to play this clip here again. Neil Postman, we quoted him in the last segment. Here he is in 1988 talking about television and specifically talking about presidential debate formats. Here he is.
This cannot be taken seriously by an informed public. I mean, what is a debate? We have President Reagan and Vice President Mondale in front of the camera. And someone like Barbara Walters says, first question for you, Mr. President, is what do you think is the solution to the problem in the Middle East. You will have 2 minutes to answer, after which Vice President Mondale will have 60 seconds for rebuttal. Now, who can take that seriously? If Reagan and Mondale were serious men, in fact, they would turn to Miss Walters and say, what kind of men do you think we are? We're running for the highest office in the land. You can't answer a question like this in 2 minutes, nor can you rebut someone else's answer in 60 seconds. Or they might turn to Miss Walters and say, what kind of people do you think the American public is? That they will put up with a forum in which candidates for the presidency are asked to respond to a question like this in 2 minutes or 1 minute. But in fact, none of that ever happens. Reagan does answer, and Mondale does give his rebuttal, and everyone goes on with this charade that television is informing the public. In fact, television, I would argue, is not. It's amusing the public, and that this is not a legitimate form of political discourse, but is taken right from the values of show business.
My question is, when will the American people, when will you stand up and say, what kind of man do you think I am? To the media, to pop culture, to everything that people are trying to sell you. What kind of man do you think I am? And they'll probably come back and they'll say, well, you're someone who's been buying what we've been selling for decades. And you say, yeah, well, not anymore. I'll give you one example of changing language, which is all part of the progressive takeover, right? This is Oxford Dictionary. So when you Google the definition of a word, this is what pops up in Google, is Oxford Dictionary. It's the definition of the word bigot. Guys, can you throw up the first one? So the first definition is a person who is intolerant towards those holding different opinions. Okay, they've changed it. Now, next slide, a person who is unreasonably attached to a belief, opinion, or faction, especially one who is, not only, but especially one who's prejudiced against or antagonistic towards a person or people on the basis of their membership of a particular group. Okay, so the difference is, bigot used to be the person who wasn't tolerant of you. The new definition is you are the bigot. See the old switcheroo they pulled on you? The old flipperoo. You being unreasonably attached to a belief is bigoted of you. So give me an example. So let's say I say that marriage is between a man and a woman because it is, and that's been that way for thousands of years. So I believe that, and you are outraged. So you won't let me become a professor. You won't let me be the manager of a company like Mozilla. Again, the CEO of Mozilla a couple years ago was fired because it was found out that in 2008, so it was like 10 years prior, he gave $1,000 to the Prop 8 campaign in California, which defined marriage between a man and a woman. He was fired from his job 10 years after the fact, okay? So you won't let me be the manager of a company. You try to get me fired from my job, whatever. The original definition, you would be the bigot because you're the one who doesn't have tolerance. You're intolerant towards my opinion. So you're the bigot, right? But now, the new definition says that I'm the bigot because I'm the one holding on to an unreasonable opinion, says who? That is antagonistic towards, in this case, gay people, right? See how they did that? Pretty amazing. So if you don't think kids should get puberty-blocking drugs when they're 8 so that they can get a sex change surgery easier when they're 18, I feel very strongly about that issue. Therefore, because I feel strongly about it, that's the words, right? Unreasonably attached, again, unreasonably, according to who sets that standard of whether that's unreasonable or not, to a belief, opinion, okay? So I believe that strongly. I'm the bigot. Not the other person who wants to put you and me on some sort of list for having this opinion that every single person has ever had for all of human existence, right? So Now, I'm the bigot, not them. I support Trump because he lowered taxes, signed Middle East peace deals, passed criminal justice reform, and the left wants to put you and me on some sort of list so I can never be employable again. Before the definition changed, they were the bigot. Now I'm the bigot by the new definition. See how that works? Pretty amazing. And of course, Christians are going to be targeted specifically because when you think of a group in America that is seen as having a strongly held traditional conviction, what group first comes to mind? Christians, at least that used to be the case. Christians who care about the truth anymore. I got to take a break here because we got some good guests, but I was reading, I'll do this real quick. I got 60 seconds. Ron Dreher wrote a little piece about Dante's Inferno, and when Dante enters the Terrace of Wrath, he meets this guy, Marco, and Dante asks him how the world's become such a mess. And this is written in the 1300s, right? And Marco tells Dante that people in the world have abdicated their personal responsibility, and they blame everyone but themselves for the disorder of the world. That's why the world's so screwed up. We all do it. None of us want to take personal responsibility, but there comes a certain point when conservatives need to say to cable news and the education system and the pop cultures in Hollywood, pop culture makers and the sports executives, and everyone just smashing this Marxist propaganda in your face all day. At a certain point, and I'm at it. I don't know where you are, but I'm at it. At a certain point, you need to say, what kind of man do you think I am? I'm done with it. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. So I think all of our attention should be focused on Pennsylvania right now. And to do that, I want to go to the congressman of the 16th district. That's Erie and then South. Erie just blew by like 1 point, and then all the southern counties are red by quite a bit. And that's Mike Kelly. Congressman, how are you, sir?
I'm really good, Mike. Thanks for having me on.
Good to talk to you. So let's go back a couple weeks. What are some of the things that the Secretary of State decided and the Pennsylvania Supreme Court confirmed that you and I believe is not appropriate?
Yeah, a couple of years ago, actually, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court decided to go outside our state constitution and redistrict us all. And taking place a couple of years before the next survey would be taken, and we would redraw then. But the court decided, we don't really want to wait for that census to take place. We'll just redraw it ourselves, even though it was outside the Constitution. They got away with doing it. So I went from being in Pennsylvania 3 to Pennsylvania 16. Then when you throw in Governor Wolf and then our Secretary of State, and then Mike, there's a reason that we have calendars and clocks, and there's a reason that we state very clearly what those dates and what those times mean. So November 3rd at 8 p.m. that's when the polls close, and then you're supposed to start counting ballots. But in Pennsylvania, Governor Wolf and our Secretary of State decided, no, we will still accept votes coming in as long as they're postmarked before a certain time. And that time, again, is on November the 3rd. But then all of a sudden, these things start showing up, these ballot boxes showing up. And we did a lot of things outside of the ordinary. Of course, this is a pandemic, and I understand that. But this mail-in ballot process is the one that, so President Trump drawing, like we get to 9:30, 10 o'clock on November the 3rd, and he's up by 700,000 votes. And it looks like Pennsylvania's strong. Pennsylvania's gone red again, every place but Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. Looking really good in State College. Those are the three little blue dots around Pennsylvania. And then the harvest begins. And what we've seen is an extension of when votes would be counted. Looked at all different kinds of scenarios where we have an indication that voter fraud has taken place, and a lot of different ways of people addressing this year's election. So Pennsylvania right now is really one hot mess, with an awful lot for the state government, the governor and the Secretary of State to answer for. So we have a lot of lawsuits going on. A lot of it has to go with what took place, when it took place, and then how are these things being counted in the fact that in most cases, especially when you get in Philadelphia, we weren't allowed to have observers even in where the votes were taking place. So they cardboarded the windows, they put plywood up, and then they did allow people in, but only if they were anywhere from 60 to, in some cases, almost a football field away from where the votes were taken. So
which is
oversight,
nothing.
no.
So
Undersight, yes.
What would you say? What would you say the likelihood of fraud was, and then what is the likelihood that we can prove it and possibly overturn some results?
Yeah, well, I think, Mike, forever, people have always talked about Philadelphia, and this is not just now, this is probably half a century longer, decades at all. And totally don't forget it, it's so corrupt. And people just took it for granted. Well, that's Philadelphia. My question is, well, if you've known it for decades, or for almost 100 years, why didn't we do something about it? Don't accept it, that just because it's Philadelphia, they get away with that. I think where we are right now, there are so many allegations and there's so many irregularities about the way this election was held. We have great cause to really take a longer, deeper look into these allegations and see if, in fact, they took place. And listen, I don't know about you, but I remember very clearly the Brett Kavanaugh hearings for him to go on the Supreme Court, and a lot of allegations came up about him, and they said, well, they must be believed. They must be believed. These women, they have to be heard. They must be believed. In this case, the same people that had to make sure that everybody got their day in court and must be believed are the same people who are saying, oh, no. If you can't prove it, then we won't accept it. Say, well, that's why they're called investigations, and that's why we have to take a long, deep look into it. Mike, I feel very confident that when the dust settles and we're able to get through all of what took place on November the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, most of it after hours, so you close down counting, you find out how many votes you need, then miraculously during the night, the angels come in and drop boxes and say, oh, geez, here's another 10,000 here. Here's some more over here that we just found. So we'll get to the bottom of it. And my personal feeling is, from what I've heard, what I've seen, this is a race that is far from over.
What would that fraud look like, right? Because how would it have happened? I mean, obviously we have unprecedented mail-in ballots, right? So the opportunity for it is unlike never before. But can you walk me through a potential scenario of what the fraud would look like? Because it has to be proven in order for things to be overturned.
Right, and so then the investigation then would take place, and the people doing the investigation, of course, would be looking for certain things. Now, what that would be? Well, how were these mail-in ballots? What's the time and date on them? Are they stamped? Are they not stamped? Are they signed? Are they not signed? Isn't it amazing? We have ballots that came in that only one choice was made, and that was only for the President of the United States. None of the down ballot votes were taken. So it calls into question. That's such an odd thing. It's just statistics. Yeah. Statistically, that doesn't work out. So anybody that took statistics and probability anywhere in their lifetime would look at this and say, whoa, wait a minute. This makes no sense.
Yeah, I don't understand the only voting for Joe Biden part. That's very odd. Tell me a little bit about the demographics of Pennsylvania. It's such a funny place. I used to live in Bucks County when I was little. So it's a bouncing back and forth red-blue state politically or presidentially. You have Democratic governor, Democratic Secretary of State, Republican-controlled state legislature. As you said, it's all country except for the blue dots. What's going on in Pennsylvania demographically that makes it such a hodgepodge, if you will?
Yeah, and very well described. I've heard people many times say, well, Pennsylvania's Philadelphia in the east, Pittsburgh in the west, and Alabama in the middle. And I think that's pretty accurate about who we are. But again, getting down to the way things divide up in PA, it wasn't until we got redistricted at the end of 17 that we started to look at disparity in the way the seats were falling, because we had a dominant number of Republicans in the House of Representatives. Pennsylvania decided it wasn't fair. Pennsylvania Supreme Court decided it wasn't fair, and then decided to redistrict it, which went totally outside of what the Pennsylvania Constitution says, and did away with the districting that had been done previously after the 2010 census. And what they were trying to do was to get to an even number of Republicans and Democrats. And so if you can't get it by winning elections, you get it by redistricting people. And I think at that time, I thought, we should have bells and whistles and lights flashing about what was happening in Pennsylvania. Really what happened in Pennsylvania was the Supreme Court in Pennsylvania went from a kind of an even court to a 5-2 P versus R, five Democrats versus 2 Republicans. And at that point, decisions are made outside of the realm of what the legislature could have done. So
Wow.
now I don't want to be critical
who
of the
decides the
Pennsylvania state
court?
legislature, but they needed to have a stronger stand on that. And I think that when that happened, it really called into effect to say, you know what, this is going to change where it is that we're going.
Yeah, it just came on. Who decides the Supreme Court makeup of Pennsylvania?
Well, the legislation is supposed not the makeup of the courts. The districting is supposed to be done by the legislature, agreed upon.
Who appoints the judges? I'm sorry, I should say who appoints the judges?
The judges.
My question. Sorry.
That's an election, Mike. They're all elected. They're not appointed.
Are they?
Elected.
Interesting.
The Supreme Court is an elected court.
Wow, 5-2 Democrat.
Well, you know what? I think again, if you don't know how the game's played, or you don't know how the rules can affect you, I think the most important person in any type of an operation is the guy that knows the rules, because you can use the rules one way or the other. And if you know the rules and the person you're working against doesn't know the rules, you can sure swing things. And that's what happened in Pennsylvania. We didn't. I just don't think we concentrated in the elections on Supreme Court judges. And the Democrats did, because I think they took a long look at the fact that, listen, we've got to change governors in these different states, the Democrat Party, and we've got to take a look at where we can influence courts. We've got to make sure that we win courts and we get majorities in the courts.
And I would say
do that in Pennsylvania.
If I may, sorry, Congressman, the same thing with George Soros spending a ton of money on city attorney races, right? Very inexpensive, and they have a huge leeway, and they, again, similar with making the rules. 30 seconds, Congressman, hate to do this to you, but what do you think the chances are that Pennsylvania can swing to Trump's favor once the investigations are over?
All right. Well, we're both sports guys. This is what I'm saying. Listen, we're not going to play it through the whistle. We're going to play it through the echo of the whistle. We're going to stay on our block until there's no time left on the clock. And I mean that sincerely. If we play it through the whistle or the echo of the whistle, we have a good chance of getting Pennsylvania back where it belongs. The Keystone State is a state that Donald Trump should win, and we have to get back and we have to win it.
And there's no one I trust more to play through the whistle than Donald Trump. Right? So I'm not worried about him. Not worried about him playing through the whistle.
There's no quit.
All
There's
right.
no quitting that man.
Yeah, right. Congressman Mike Kelly representing Erie, West Pennsylvania. Thanks, Congressman. Appreciate you.
Michael, thank you so much.
Have a great day. Good luck in Pennsylvania. Talk with Kerry Lucas coming up next. Talk about the future of the Republican Party and what that tent looks like moving forward. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. So for the sake of this 10-minute conversation, we are going to assume, of course, that the president should do every single legal thing that he needs to do in order to hopefully still win the presidency. Okay, so I don't want any emails from people being like, oh, Slater, you're giving up. Not the conversation here. We still need to do that. Either way, really, whether he wins or loses, I do want to talk about what the next 3 months looks like, and then what the new Republican Party looks like. This coalition, this tent, if you will, that Trump has been a major part of bringing together. And to do that, I want to do it with one of our friends, Kerry Lucas. She's the vice president of Independent Women's Voice. Kerry, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me on.
Glad you're here. Let's talk about this base first. This maybe, I don't know if you want to call it new Republican Party or whatever. What is the Republican Party now? Demographically and principally, what is it?
You know, I think the most important change is that it's not an apologetic party anymore. I think back to what the big difference is and what President Trump has kind of done for the party. And I do think it is apologize for being for limited government. We're not going to stand up and let people silence us or let us, be shamed into not representing our views. We're not going to stand by while people call us racist, sexist, homophobic, etc. Just for standing up for our beliefs. So I think that is really one of the biggest changes. Don't lose, regardless of where we end up in January, because I think we need to keep that kind of fight moving forward.
Yeah, that's so good. I think, everyone talked about the silent Trump voter these last couple months. And that's such crap. Excuse me. I don't think there's any more of that, right? I think people need to be proud of their stances on this stuff. And we can't afford to be silent anymore. We can't rely on that anymore.
Yeah, though it is interesting. I feel like one of the so kind of all of the voter information is being kind of shaking out over the last week, and we're learning more about where the voters. To me, to find out who it is that was this quote, the shy Trump voter, and it's a lot of women like me, women living in the suburbs, middle-aged white ladies, who were afraid to speak out and afraid to say that they supported the president. And I think I know a lot of these women. And I'm not are women like me, and I think that one of the challenges is to reassure them. I think that in part, if the president is not reelected, it might get a little easier because we can have a little bit of the baggage won't be here, but we can say, you shouldn't be afraid to say, I reject what Glamour magazine says I have to think. What all the Women's March says I should think. I think for myself, and I'm not going to be worried about being canceled in the way that so many women have been in the past.
Yeah, it's so right. I think my wife, she went to work right before the election, and she assumed everyone at her work was progressive because they are vocally so. But she was in the break room with two girls, and it kind of came up, and she was all ginger about it. She didn't really want to say it, and then it turns out all three of them were voting for Trump, right? But it shouldn't need to be that like, oh, yeah. Talk about demographically, the Hispanic vote. What have you been able to uncover with this? Because at first we were told, oh, it's just Cubans in Florida. But it seems like that's maybe not really the case. And what if, as time goes on, when Hispanics come to America, it's assumed that you should be, of course, a Republican, as opposed to what it is now, where you should, of course, be a Democrat. Is that possible?
I hope always have a sense that people are not going to be kind of put in boxes based on their ethnicity. But it sure is wonderful to think of no longer having those options kind of presented to people as such, or the media no longer discussing people as if just because you are a member of this minority group or ethnic group, that you, of course, are going to be to think like that. And I do think there's been a lot of pushback. And you were about to see, it will be interesting, if it is a President Biden, what does that mean? And what are the opportunities? I think there's a lot of stuff that people have kind of taken for granted. The opportunities to work, the rising wages, even the idea of what we've foreign policy and peace in the Middle East. All this is not set in stone. I do worry, and I think that people might learn to they may have been frustrated with some of the tweeting, but they may be even more frustrated with the policies that are going to be coming down the pike.
Well, we read the AFP article the other day that talked about how Biden is going to take a more conventional stance with Iran, and you're like, well, wait a second, like that's the exact opposite of what Trump's done these last 4 years to great success. Let's talk about the next 3 months. So, what do you suggest the president do the next 3 months? I'll let you go any direction, but I've heard this thing, declassify it all. Like, what does that really mean? Declassify what? And please go anywhere you want. What do you think we should look for the next?
Yeah, and I think that the biggest issue should be let the sunlight in, because I do think that in some ways, it's almost funny to say it. It sounds so untypical, but I think that the president has been a little bit meek in terms of really pushing to get some of the information about what happened with Spygate. This is really, I think that, again, it's one of those things that some of us conservatives who've been following this, we're used to having heard about the abuse of. But a lot of the American people have been able to kind of scoot by without recognizing just what an unbelievable, egregious misuse of federal power this was. Anything that is related to this needs to be declassified. This needs to be pushed out there. And I also think that a lot of the deliberations that have been kind of closed doors when it comes to what's happened, what's been the COVID response. Why not make some of those emails public? Why not show the people what different people were saying? So it's not just the president being kind of exposed for his statements to whatever reporter who can then take it out of context. Make some of this public. It's in the public. The public system. It's just waiting to be FOIA'd. Let's get it out there now.
Yeah, that's so right. And I don't. It shouldn't be in the name of, as I'm kind of thinking about it as you were talking, like, burn it all down, like, let's expose it all, burn it. It's not really that, although maybe a little, but yeah, even if he has to go in these next 3 months, like, expose it all. That'd be beautiful. Last question for you, Carrie.
Yeah.
we just did the first 2 segments of the show about just our progressive culture and how it's everywhere. And progressives control every single aspect of our popular culture, every single thing of it, including the media, of course. And we talked about the need to just unplug from it all and stop being influenced and manipulated by progressive culture in every single way, like from cable news, but also like the toys we buy for our kids and the music, like everything. So I don't know, I know I'm bombarded, I'm just throwing this at you and you haven't really thought about it, maybe you have, but what do you think of that and how do we do that? And if we do that, right, if we unplug from the popular culture, the progressive popular culture, what does that look like? How would that be different? How would our country be different? How would the conservative movement be different?
Yeah, and I think actually, I feel like this is, if there's, obviously it's been a little bit of a dark time, a little depressing, great things to be optimistic about. It's this. I do think that a lot of conservatives on election night, they were watching Fox News and said, what is this? Like, what on earth? Like, where can we go to have people who are not kind of in the pocket of the left? And I think it means good things for anyone tuning into a show like this. You are right now part of the solution. There should be a proliferation of alternatives like this, and we should stop being kind of a slave to thinking you have no other choice other than MSNBC or Fox News. And we can push back. This is, I think, one of the great things is, yes, it wasn't a blue wave. We didn't win as much as we had hoped, but there are a lot of people. Did you think of what the media threw at this president and really at the Republican Party, trying to make it so people were so afraid? But a lot of people came out, more people than ever before, voted for a more conservative alternative. That's a lot of reason to be optimistic. Imagine what we could do if we didn't have the press. There are people out there who say, we're going to find ways to get around this. We're going to find ways in social media. We're going to find ways in regular media. We're going to find ways around Hollywood and even the education system. Public education is one that's losing power every time you make a pod, every time you consume a different educational resource. So out there, and I do think that we have the potential to make it a lot brighter.
I'm super encouraged by that. Carrie Lucas, Vice President, Independent Women's Voice. Thanks, Carrie. Appreciate you.
Great. Thanks for having me on.
Have an awesome day. True story. Mike Slater. Spread the word.